Let me first thank the Chemtech Foundation that in spite of all the difficulties arising out of pandemic, they have gone ahead and arranged this virtual platform for the very important and relevant topic, building sustainable resilience of EPC industry and readiness for the future growth. The theme of the conference is most appropriate since it covers post-pandemic sustainability of the EPC companies, as well as how the companies are equipped and ready to successfully manage the tremendous growth of process plant industry in the coming years. I must say that these were most difficult times for each and every person in our industry during the past 1 year, when we witnessed never before type of pandemic in the world. Most of the businesses were badly affected. Naturally, chemical industry was not an exception. This phenomena resulted into lack of orders for EPC companies as well as EPC consultants and several suppliers of equipment components for the process plant as well as construction contractors. It was therefore indeed kind of a challenge for all the enterprises to sustain the business in terms of delivering the project's product in time in spite of full and partial lockdowns, combined with the issue of migrant workers as well as lack of full shop floor occupancy or pointing towards financial losses by end of the year. The resilience of the Indian businesses were tested to its peak. Fortunately, several enterprises have managed to survive. I must thank at this juncture all the customers from public sector as well as private sectors for supporting the industry and avoid massive job cuts and losses. A number of refinery expansion, petrochemical projects, as well as ammonia urea plants and alumina projects made it possible for our industry to sustain through this difficult time. Looking at the immediate near future, I see the prospects brightening up within a year or two at very high levels. Just to give an example, the refining capacity of the country is expected to grow from 250 million metric tons per annum to 325 million metric tons per annum by 2025. That's about 75 million tons, and given an average of 10 million tons of refining capacity, it's about 6 to 7 grassroots refineries. Further, there's a promise from the government and from the companies to raise it by another 175 million tons per annum in the next 5 years up to 2030, which are under discussions. A similar phenomena of growth can be expected in the petrochemical field, where number of PVC, HDPE, LLDP, as well as PP plants are expected to be set up within the next 5 years, bringing the capacity of these polymers from 10 million tons to 20 million tons per annum. Another interesting development is a phosphatic fertilizer, where we are expecting up to 4 million tons per annum capacity in next 5 years. The question comes to the mind of the user industry, that is our customers, whether the existing EPC, EPCM, PMC industries are ready to take up these challenges in terms of qualified, experienced number of engineers, the capacity for manufacture of equipment components, as well as availability of skilled and unskilled construction labor, not to forget the project management aspects for such mega complex. Therefore, we are rightfully titled the theme of the panel discussion as Promising Landscape for EPC Business, How Ready We Are. We are today top-notch industry experts to address the issue. I will take a few minutes to introduce them. I start with Srinagesh, sir. Mr. Srinagesh works with Reliance Industries and is responsible for the procurement in the oil to chemical business, O2C. He has been involved in the complex and multi-billion dollar J3 mega project, where all of you are familiar with. He has hands-on experience across manufacturing, marketing, project management, procurement, especially in the mid and downstream sector in the oil and gas industry. Of course, he worked earlier with our type of industry, that is BHP and Larsen Group. Welcome, Mr. Srinagesh. Let me also invite our other guest, industry veteran Sanjaya Joshi, the ex-MD of Aker Solution, presently Director Transformation, who has witnessed several ups and downs in the country for the EPC and EPCM business sector. Mr. Joshi is currently Director of Transformation at Aker Solution. He recently took on the role after many years at Aker Solution as a country manager of India and 4 years as Senior Vice President of Customer Management for the Asia Pacific region. He has extensive professional experience in both the upstream and downstream sector. Sanjay received the Business Leader of the Year in Engineering Services Award in 2015 from the same Chemtech Foundation in recognition of his contribution to the Indian engineering industry. Last but not the least, may I now invite Mr. Sankaran, Senior VP Proposals, Petrofac, who has seen stupendous growth of EPC industry in Middle East, especially in last 1 decade, and has been associated with EPC projects in Middle East for more than 2 decades. Chemical engineer and a chartered financial analyst, CFA, with 33 years of operation and multifunctional experience in project management, engineering, procurement, proposals, estimating, budget planning, EPC engineering companies for project in excess of $4 billion in oil and gas, petrochemical, polymer, pharmaceutical engineering industries. Currently, as Senior VP and Functional Head of Proposals, responsible for worldwide tendering and business acquisition efforts, beside additional responsibility as project sponsor for India projects and driving EPC delivery initiative from India. Mr. Sankaran, welcome. So I must thank all of them for sparing their valuable time and all of you to listen to us after the almost 4 hours of 3 hours of detailed presentation by the experts in the industry. May I come to Mr. Srinagesh first, sir? You have been associated with the huge capital investment by your group in the last decade for the refinery and petrochemical complex at Jamnagar, as well as number of projects at other locations. What are your views, as well as your concerns, if any, regarding the engineering, procurement, and construction of such mega complex? How, in your opinion, these industries are ready to take on future big challenges? So over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Samudra. Good evening. At the outset, I'm delighted to be on this panel discussion. As owners, we want to sweat our assets through their life cycle and more. If that be the case, then what are our expectations? Our expectations are 1, safety, 2, availability of our plants, which is uptime, 3, reliability of the equipment, 4, quality, 5, schedule, and 6 is risk. All this usually translates into total. I'll spend a little time on total cost of ownership later as we progress in the discussion. Having said that, execution of mega projects is all about managing risks. What are the risks that we are talking about? The number one risk that we see as Reliance is the availability of competent, capable contractors for whichever mode of execution be it, whether it's an EPC, whether it's EPCM, whether it's detailed engineering consultants, construction contractors. So this is one important risk which we perceive and we feel as well. The second is strong project management skill sets, which have to move on from the best in the class across the world to what we will call as the next in the class. 3, flawless startup, commissioning, and stabilization of our units. 4th is the schedule risk, and the 5th is the cost risk. There is a general perception in the industry that if you award an EPC contract, the cost risk is automatically passed on to the EPC contractor. Partially true, but not fully, because if there is a delay in the commercial production of the plant, there will be a substantial loss to the owner. So, Mr. Samudra, to sum up, what are our concerns? I've translated our concerns into our expectations and the key risks that we need to manage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Srinagesh. It was very apt answer for the question which I raised. And I'll come back to you on this to elaborate further the subsequent questions. But let me come to the veteran, Mr. Joshi. for last more than 3 decades. Do you think, Mr. Sanjay Joshi, that EPC companies in India execute these projects to the satisfaction of the owner?
Okay, so thank you, first of all, Mr. Samudra and Chemtech for this opportunity to speak on this occasion and share my thoughts. So I believe that the EPC companies that we have in our country are executing projects to the satisfaction of our customers. They have a very strong track record of delivering large projects. They have adequate capacity and they have very high competence. But at times there is a gap between the customer expectations and the EPC delivery. So this area needs a bit of a careful analysis, and we need to be very pragmatic about this. So our experience shows that if we have a very good project management and planning and a realistic schedule, then the contract brings a win-win situation for all parties. But one of the things that I want to highlight is when I compare EPC execution with projects outside India, the main difference in most of the cases is the maturity of feed. The feed package at times doesn't adequately address all the issues. And during EPC execution, we spend time in design optimization because there is always a cost and schedule pressure. So this leads to a bit of a bunching effect towards the end, a lot of pressure on construction, and that results into sometimes quality issues and lower satisfaction level with the end client. Another aspect, I think, to deliver our projects more successfully, I think this has been discussed in the previous sessions also, that we need to be bit more, we need to introduce more automation in our delivery. So currently the EPC execution processes are very manpower intensive. So while digitalization is on the agenda of every company, I think we still have a long way to go, because this needs a collaboration between the EPC company or engineering company with the operating company from the early phase of the project, so that they get the benefit of this while running the operation also. Because we have to keep in mind that EPC execution is like 2 to 4 years, whereas the clients are operating their plants for 20 years, 30 years. So we have to keep in mind that we bring in this collaboration more effectively from the early phase of engineering. That will certainly help us to improve the satisfaction level of our customers. So I must say that EPC companies are doing a great job under the current circumstances. However, I think there is a room for improvement, and we all need to work together to bring in this improvement. So thank you, Mr.
Very well said, Mr. Joshi. I think it's appropriate answer because people are really having a lot of issues in terms of logistic, in terms of delay of equipment, and it's sometimes Herculean task to deliver the project in time. So as given circumstances, we are doing far better. That's what you feel, but there's a room for improvement. But having heard Mr. Srinagesh about his expectation and Mr. Joshi's comments on how we are performing, let me now go to Sharjah and ask Mr. Sankaran. Sankaran, what are your impression of the current Indian EPC scenario and related industry, especially in the background of your long exposure to large EPC projects implemented outside India? What do you think about further scope of improvement in the Indian EPC delivery environment? This is addition to what Mr. Joshi said. So the stage is yours now.
First of all, thanks to you, Samudra, and the organizers of Chemtech. I think it's a wonderful job what they are doing, despite the the circumstances here. On the EPC context here, I think India, we should be proud of what India has achieved and the owners have accomplished in terms of capital investments, what they have gone. The large EPC awards, what we have seen quite recently, despite the extraordinary times that we are in. It's a big positive, first of all. In terms of the EPC scenario, obviously the tenders, what we see in Indian context are very good, very comprehensive feed. A lot of engineering is being done to avoid the ambiguities, what are normally the pitfalls in an EPC execution, which one of my industry colleague Nilesh Borkar was mentioning about it a couple of minutes ago. EPCs are funded internally. The clients are financially strong, which is again a very positive in the Indian context. Before we see what we really need improvement in this part, it is important to recognize why this industry is very critical to keep it viable and growing. This industry for me is not building about building a few plants or facilities. This business is all about building a nation's prestigious facilities, which are critical to maintaining its self-sufficiency, strength, and pride, which is very perfectly fits into the Atmanirbhar aspirations, self-sufficiency and self-reliance aspirations of this country. If you go back to a background here, EPC is just not an overall integrator of E plus P plus C, but actually carries a huge overall responsibility in terms of performance, HSSE, and also a huge contractual and commercial obligations and liabilities as a single point. Every project is very unique. Mr. Barua was mentioning in his opening remarks about 50% productivity of somebody with a different productivity rate of somebody. So it is going to be dependent on location. The execution approach and strategies are going to be very bespoke, tailored. And again, Nilesh Borkar was mentioning about 10% engineering, how it is important, but I'm going to focus on the 90% here, which is really fulfilled by thousands of vendors, millions of items, and field construction, of course. So EPC contractor has a huge responsibility in terms of putting these jigsaw puzzles of millions of items, millions of pieces right first time to make it completely workable and an aesthetically good looking frame. And this is in the midst of a lot of unknowns. And you may have something very surprising what we have seen as COVID-19 situation, and which requires a lot of perseverance to collaborate under stressful situations to deliver it successfully in the way a client like Reliance is expecting the contractors, whether it is EPC or not, to deliver it for them. Coming back, we continue to keep hearing many good companies, many large companies moving away from the EPC model here, as the risk-reward scenario and the hard grind does not really get the economic or financial recognition that it truly deserves to get here. Again, if I take some of the the valuable takeaways, what Mr. Barua was mentioning about the open communication, about the trust, about the transparency, more reporting, more engagement. I cannot agree more on that. It is absolutely, we need to agree with this. But from an EPC perspective, yes, I think we should support the open communication and mutual support, what we are expecting from the owners within the framework of a balanced T's and C's, practical approach to approval of, say, additional qualified vendors, where we going to see a lot of overloading. While this is a very happy situation that we see a lot of jobs, this is also going to place a lot of overloading on the supply chain, especially the fabrication industries like the pressure vessels or columns or exchanges. And the other thing is about the aligning the aspirations with the possibilities on the schedule. I don't want to mention it as an unrealistic schedule, but definitely an overambitious and aggressive schedule could completely put a sequential construction in a disorder, which I don't think it really benefits anyone, or it can even be unsafe under a very penalizing contract regime, which is we have to be very careful and cautious about it. The second most important thing is about maintaining a good, encouraging cash flow. I'm not saying that we need a 50% advance on the day one, but it has to be a very enabling, encouraging cash flow. We know where we are today as an entire supply chain, including the EPC, where people really cannot finance the execution phase. So I think this is the other aspect I think we should really see for improvement here, where we can enable a positive payment terms, which can be very supporting. If we really need to, the owners have to ensure, get the benefit. This EPC sector need to achieve the sustainability, the progress, and the resilience we all desire.
Yeah, I think Sankaran very well said. I think you put it so subtly. I think the message is loud and clear. I mean, you are not so direct. But then I want to go back to Mr. Srinagesh. Having heard now from Mr. Joshi about our pride and confidence in delivering the goods to you, project to you in time and stuff like that, and Sankaran pointing out certain areas which I think more towards customer also it is intent. So what's your opinion on the question which I raised to Mr. Sankaran? Are there any lacuna? Are there any negativities there in the industry you find which we can improve upon? Because we want a real feedback actually.
Yes, Mr. Samudra. First of all, Mr. Sankaran, Mr. Joshi, Mr. Samudra, let me compliment all the EPC contractors, especially in India, who've been delivering under extremely difficult situations. So we have a good set of EPC contractors, albeit limited, but our compliments to them. We agree with some of the views that have been expressed by Sanjay and Sankaran. But having said that, let me try and answer this question, which are those areas of improvement from our view. I'm sure some of these points that I'm going to exchange are very well known to everybody, but nonetheless, let me still say them at the cost of repetition. I think for me personally, one of the most important areas of improvement is extensive modularization. When I say extensive, I really mean extensive. The interface management of EPC contractors and the dependence of EPC contractors on vendor inputs to release construction drawings to site is getting a little overemphasized. The past experience, knowledge, and competence of the EPC contractors must be utilized without waiting for vendor inputs to release construction drawings. And this is where your risk-taking ability without too much of optimization on costs has to come into play. And that's how the front generations at site would substantially increase, is what I believe. Developing capable and competent construction contractors to support the EPC contractors who have the necessary resources and the skill sets with workers who can multitask is the third point. Maximization of mechanization, automation during construction. In addition, measuring construction productivity and monitoring through digitization, I think is very important. There are one or two very forward-looking suggestions that we have. I personally am not too sure whether how successful they are implemented, but I've heard Exxon and Shell have implemented them very successfully. So I thought, let me talk about it for a minute. The advanced work packages, which enable seamless digital flow of information related to design, drawings, documents, availability of the materials work pack-wise, will really help the ground, the construction supervision teams at the ground level to prioritize and plan their work, because it will give them the front availability. Yes, it will involve initial upfront costs But as owners, we are willing to take that as a part of the EPC cost. In addition, I understand that although I'm not too sure about it, but the new thing about constraint analysis, which is highly digitized, the field mobility apps, which have now come in, and we have heard Mr. Anand Saina from L&T about it. And lastly is the track and trace programs for on-site management of the materials. Now they're 100% digitized. We have heard L&T about it. So these are some of the areas of improvement which I believe the EPC contractors can look forward to, and we would be glad if you're able to implement them. Having said that, I want to spend one more minute on what I said earlier with respect to total cost of ownership. Now, what does total cost of ownership mean to Reliance? It means that the acquisition cost of an asset right up to commissioning, the operations cost, the maintenance cost, the change management cost, which is debottlenecking and efficiency improvement, and low downtimes, which would otherwise lead to loss of production. And finally, a very important point for us is O&M spares management across the life cycle of our project. Right? If I were to just give one example, we had in J3 procured 3,000 plus pumps within a time period of 15, 18 months. Now, if we would cherry pick based on cost and go to various vendors, then managing our spares for operation and maintenance for the next 25 years would get difficult. Now, am I saying that we expect the EPC contractors to support us in each of these elements of the ECO? No, the answer is no, we're not. But what we would be very glad is to collaborate with you as we are doing an EPC contract or prior to placement of the EPC contract to see, can we work together, even if it's some increase in cost, to meet these requirements of the owners so that we can sweat our assets through the life cycle for the next 35, 40 years. So I think this is what I wanted to share. Thank you.
No, I must thank you for a very exhaustive, information. What we expect from the EPC contractor. At the end of this session, I'll come back to you on this subject very. I must tell you that this is really very good information you have given from the owner's perspective. I just change the topic to now to the consultants and the EPCM and PMC contractor. Our country has, Mr. Joshi, it is for you. Our country has set of EPC contractor, though less number because the risks are very high for them, and number of EPCM and PMC consultant. So now with this kind of a tsunami, I would not say mini tsunami coming in the industry for the projects, do you foresee in future that more satellite companies who will act as some kind of a ancillary being partner for engineering?
So I would say, partnering with engineering or construction companies is already prevalent in our industry. So this is going on for many years. So Aker Solutions, for example, has built strong relationships with most of the large EPC players over a period of last 15, 20 years. So I foresee a good future for ancillaries as engineering partners, provided this will help us to, they will have, the EPC companies will have in their partners access to skills, the new processes in engineering, and project execution capability. So all these things can be certainly given by the engineering companies if you are partnering from the beginning. So early engagement with the EPC contractor, that is very, very important for an engineering partner. Another thing I want to highlight is in India, many of the EPC companies already have their own engineering centers. So obviously, companies like us sometimes really need to have a huge tenacity to maintain the right capacity. So if this partnering arrangement is more reinforced going forward, that will help both EPC and engineering companies so that they can have versatility, specialist support from companies like ours, flexibility, capacity, and all these things can be there. And both sides, there will be a very sustainable business model. So first of all, thank you very much for asking these questions. So I was almost tempted to say that EPC companies should depend on engineering companies like us to do all the engineering, and we'll then probably provide a right muscle for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a win-win situation for all. And once you aligned on the longer range, longer times, then you can understand each other's pluses and minuses very well and adapt to the situation and deliver the finally goods to the owner. But one of the anchor in the media used to ask question, the whole India wants to know. So, again, I come back to Mr. Srinagesh. All the EPC industries in India are interested to know. Reliance, which was going on the EPC mode of contracting earlier, and is to buy directly equipment, components, and the construction companies. I see a change taking place now. You're going to EPC. So, if it is not so confidential, could you just highlight what do you feel about this? And so, we'll be very happy to learn from you this.
No, it's not definitely confidential, Mr. Samudra. And as owners, as Reliance, I'm sure we are definitely interested in executing projects on LSTK or EPC mode. There's no two thoughts about it. But having said that, we will be taking judicious decisions based on, one, the market conditions at that point in time. Number two, the availability and the workloads of competent and capable EPC contractors. And then we will take a decision whether which mode we would like to go. Will we go the conventional mode, the EPCM mode, or we will go open book, convertible LSTK, or a pure EPC? I think while we are definitely wanting to go on the EPC mode, I would request the EPC contractors to tempt us to go on the EPC mode, but trying to work with us collaboratively on some of the expectations that we spoke about. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. It's very nice to hear that Reliance also would like to consider EPC mode whenever it is feasible. That is a good news. Coming back to Mr. Sankaran, I've been wanting to ask one question to you, which is bothering you all the time. That always people talk about construction techniques being better in outside India. People are more advanced. Now, could you just highlight some of the aspects which we can learn in India more? Of course, our predecessor, our earlier two speakers talked about the construction automation from Larsen to Grow. Is there any room for improvement in that sector from your experience?
Of course, the scope for improvement exists in anything, definitely. Why not? We are evolving as human beings. Before I answer your question, Samudra, just two connected points, one for Srinagesh and one for Mr. Joshi. Definitely, today our offerings also consists of post-execution, EPC execution, operation and maintenance. So we recognize the criticality of the spares. So definitely, I think EPC companies do recognize the post-execution and handover aspects. And as regards, the relationship, the synergetic, the complementing relationship between the engineering companies and the EPC. In fact, we just don't, engage engineering companies only for execution of EPC jobs. In fact, we do them, even we get with them even for the bidding efforts. So, we jointly bid, in fact, in many places where we engage their engineering companies. So it is a very synergetic relationship. Coming back to your question, Samudra, it is a very interesting question. But what I have to say here is that each project location is very unique. So, and strategies have to be very tailored. So we cannot just replicate the strategies, the approach like modularization, etc., followed in some other place or location, because each place is very, very unique. If you look at the Indian context, a lot of mega projects are in proximity to large populated cities and towns, or the cities have grown around these economic engines, we can put it like this. The logistics of moving large modules and over-dimensional items is an issue we need to really factor in our transportation here. And a lot of these projects today are inland, so there are movement restrictions. And other than the grassroots projects today, most of the projects, what we see, especially in the refining and the hydrocarbon sector, it's all about in the existing refineries with limited space, brownfield environment. So there is going to be a lot of limitations, and we need to look at those aspects as well. But having said that, we need to look at perhaps a hybrid approach, not fully modularization, but in terms of a large amount of, say, a steel fabrication or a piping fabrication, or a small packages, couple of packages. We can look at that, which should in fact help in terms of when we talk about limited workspace, the brownfield environment, it is a live environment, running plants. If, for example, today Reliance is continuously expanding their existing plants, so there are going to be limitations on the manpower that they are going to allow in that, and obviously the safety and security, the efficiency aspects, etc. So I do see a lot of opportunity on the prefabrication front, where we do need a lot of capacities to meet the demands what we are talking today here. Again, EPC is something, it is still a human resources dominated, notwithstanding the digitalization, automation, etc. So obviously there is, a lot of people to people engagement, in terms of planning, what was talked about it, sequencing the construction, these are all very important here. Certainly, I think India needs a lot of fabrication capacities if we have to, fully realize or capitalize the opportunities that are going to be available in the coming years.
I mean, very well answered. And in that, I just want to extend the question to you. Now, a lot of things are talked about India's growth, and especially in light of a little bit slowdown in the world post-pandemic, where India is now talking about so many projects. What is your perception from outside? I mean, you're Indian, of course, but sitting in Sharjah and looking at the news from abroad, what do you think about India? How is it perceived in the international market, the growth part of it?
You read my profile. I am actually driving the India EPC delivery, and I'm very closely connected. My aspiration is to want to make, for my own company, a solid EPC delivery organization from India. India has an excellent resource of engineers, technical specialists like yours, like Sanjay's organization, very reputed with long experience here, very promising, for example, outlook. And the opportunities are going to be abundant. We can discuss about whether it is X billion or Y billion, but it is certainly going to be billions and billions opportunities in the next 10 years. Sanjay talked about, each project duration of 3 to 4 years. So if we talk about even with the foam outlook, what we have, the capex outlay here of people. So for the next 10 years, really we are going to have a huge amount of opportunities, whether for engineering companies, whether for EPC. So it's very promising, to be very frank, and it definitely an attraction for the companies to get into this country to contribute to building up this nation, as I started earlier. Having said that, there are areas where we need to really enhance, augment resources and capacities here. obviously, we are not going to restrict only talking about a project in refineries or petchem. There is going to be a lot of integration of petchem with refining. Could be LNG plants, pipelines. To be talking about strategic storages, strategic reserves here. And this is going to be all around the country. But today, if you look at it, the manufacturing facilities of engineering products, like, as I said here, pipes or valves or whatever you talk, it is mostly concentrated on the western part of India in a couple of states and maybe slightly in one or two southern states. But if you look at it, the eastern part is really, needing a lot of manufacturing facilities, which in fact brings it closer to the project locations, in proximity to the location, saves a lot of logistics here, and makes it more efficient execution here and faster to closer to the location. Today we heard about a 1 lakh crore or 2 lakh crore of expansion and development in Numaligarh refinery, which is completely on the northeastern part. So if you have good facilities in the eastern part, it makes a lot of life easier here and make it quicker and faster. What today customers are expecting. The other part, I think I want to keep stressing that, irrespective of whatever we are initiating in terms of digitalization, in terms of automation and everything, it is a people-dominated business. And this industry is not a glamorous one. It is a very hard grind with hard hats. Let me tell you this. We can see this profession is still not able to attract. It has to compete with other professions and roles here for the people. What we really need to do is instill and nurture that pride that we are building facilities that make the nation here, develop a very deep industry, technical, deep engagement here, so that we have a constant flow of good talent into this nation building sector. It is very important. If we have to get these projects realized, it is very important. We need to establish capacities and volumes. We need to have continuous resources that replenish a very aging workforce. In fact, this, even in the lean times, this can be a very good export option here.
Yeah, I think very, very, very good. Actually, now very happy to learn also from your perspective from outside that India is going now. That brings to a very important topic to you as my last question for the today's session to Mr. Joshi. That if you really believe this number, which you have to believe, of course, because these are all authentic data, that we are going to go for such a high investment, I expect that the technical manpower as an engineering company or with the owners, with the equipment suppliers or construction company needs to be doubled very quickly in next 5 to 10 years. Now, how do we take this task on our shoulders? Let's talk about engineering. How do we skill the people now? And as Sankaran said, that there's a little bit of nervousness to join this industry because it's a little bit called a thankless industry compared to IT sector. So how do we really get people on the board now to execute this mega task?
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Samudra. So I do agree with Sankaran, and it's not very easy to attract, young generation to our industry. But just before our session, we had that E&Y speaker who said about the XYZ and their expectations and their characteristics and all that. So I believe that to attract and retain good engineers in the EPC industry, we need to create excitement amongst the engineers. And this particular generation, they are passionate about protecting the environment, sustainability, and new technologies. So to keep them engaged, if we involve them in new initiatives such as digitalization, decarbonization, or projects with renewable energy kind of things, in addition to what we otherwise do to make our hands dirty, that will be a good mix of creating excitement, attracting them to our industry, and also do our job, which we need to do for nation building. And we have seen that these young engineers show a lot of energy, enthusiasm, engagement if their project has a direct or indirect social impact. So this is the new generation, and then we have to try our best to create the system for them. Now, skilling of fresh engineers is very, very important in EPC, EPCM companies. But many companies are already running this campus to corporate programs. We are also running, I think many companies are running. But then collaboration between universities and companies in India is still missing. So I think that is one improvement area if we have to attract engineers to our kind of industry. So right from their education level, they learn the importance of nation building. They start thinking on these lines. Then it will be a much better situation for us to double the capacity. That's what I think.
Absolutely, very well. So I think the time is running short now. I mean, I could go on asking question and make also the audience happy. But I think if we saw in the short time of last half an hour, the perspective from the owner, what improvements are required in EPC industry, looking at the big future waiting for us, as well as the steps taken and the advice given by the two veterans in the EPC industry, how the industry is going to face that. So with today morning session from Mr. Barua, who talked more about the EPC contractors' expectation in terms of the delivery, in terms of finance, etc. We also had a good chance to look at technical issues. And I think now we're open for question answers. The time is limited. I come back to Mitra. Are you allowed to go ahead for the next 10 minutes? Is it possible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you.
We already have started receiving questions.
Yeah.
So the first question that I have is directed to the entire panel. Anyone can answer. Do you feel that many of the EPC tenders are floated with unrealistic schedules, particularly public sector tenders?
Now, if I ask this to my dear friend Sankaran, he'll say, "Ab rulayega ke mere ko?" So Sankaran, please take this question.
Happy to take the question, Samudra. In fact, I don't know if who asked this question. I would request that gentleman or lady to watch the last session on Friday. We have a smart solution to the schedule conflicts. So, but what I can say is it is difficult to say what is realistic and what is unrealistic. It is quite relative. I might say 30 months is unrealistic. Somebody says even 40 months is unrealistic. So the point is what is unrealistic is difficult to debate on this. But what I think we need to do is it is about matching of the owner's aspirations with the possibilities, what we can achieve really here. We definitely need to bridge this gap, converge. Definitely, as EPCs, we need to understand that owners have much larger stake. It is essential for them to, put the plants, put the facilities into beneficial commercial operation as soon as possible. And there are a lot of ingredients that need to go here, as people talked about, a good engineering package, a good planning, obviously, all kinds of, the automation, digitalization is going to enable here. So it is a combined effort. At the end of the day, again, I go back to my favorite topic. This is a people's business here, irrespective of whatever, machines, at the end, it is individual commitment, passion, and drive towards realizing a collective performance and objectives here. EPC is all about, individual pride of having achieved something towards collective benefit. So somebody can do wonders, in a short time. So it's all about how we converge between the EPC contractor and the larger supply chain with owners' expectations here.
Maybe Srinagesh, you can add some few sentences. What do you think of this question? You are mute, Mr. Srinagesh. Srinagesh, can you hear me? Would you like to add something on this? Or is okay?
No,
the owners?
Yeah, okay, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So next. Actually, this is very relevant question to the industry. And I think the customers are realizing, I mean, they sometimes they take time to really decide the order. And finally, they want to push everything in the contractor to expedite. But I think by and large, now the person who asked the question, I must tell you that the clients also realize that and they are being very considerate. So the situation is improving now slowly. Okay. Next question, madam.
The next question is for Mr. Srinagesh. How can MSME get an opportunity to work with Reliance Industries?
Okay. Definitely MSMEs should be given the opportunity, and we will be open to consider them depending on what is the item that's being supplied or the services that are being rendered and their capabilities. We welcome them to write to us and register with us. We'll see what best can be done depending on the merit of the case.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. So there is just one more question to the entire panel again. What is your take on EPC business on renewable space to replace fossil fuels for sustainable future in India?
Let me just address it. I don't know who asked the question. There is going to be expected to be $44 billion investment in the couple of years on the green hydrogen. And we have a separate session on day after tomorrow. I'll be also talking on that. So please do attend on Friday at 4 o'clock. But I must say that this business will purely go on the EPC type of action, because some of them will be on the BOO basis. There should be cost commitment upfront. So EPC has a very good opportunity in the coming years in the renewables. I can tell you that much. Maybe quickly Joshi can add some sentence on that.
Yeah, so I agree with you. That's going to be the main area, but there are one or two more things which may happen also. That is related to CO2 capture, and then finally using the hydrogen, making hydrogenation of CO2 to methanol, because methanol blending is also being talked about in the fuel. So there could be opportunities of this kind, but of course that part we are still in the early stage, and hydrogen appears to be probably getting the limelight right now for investments. I do agree with you.
But
So I think-
Samudra, if I may add to what
Sure.
you and Sanjay was mentioning, in fact, just recently we have as we speak, we have a tender for one of the largest CO2 recoveries in methanol tender, solicitation of interest that has been released. So we are going to see a lot of potential here in the renewables field here, going forward, the decarbonization or hydrogen. So we are going to see a lot capex on this front.
Absolutely. So I think we can, any more question, madam?
Yes, one more question is there directed to Mr. Srinagesh.
Yeah.
Looking at the labor cost and logistics and infrastructure constraint in India, can Mr. Srinagesh comment on how effective modularization will be in our country?
Sir, you are mute, sir. Sir, you have to unmute.
Sorry. That's a good question, but let me tell you with respect to Reliance perspective. If we look at all our mega plants, whether it's Jamnagar, Dahej, Hazira, we have waterfront. So I don't believe logistics should be considered as a constraint, because if we use our waterways, any weight, any dimension today are being transported in the world. As days progress, people are breaking records in transportation weights and dimensions using ro-ro barges or ships or whatever you call it. So I don't think we are worried as Reliance on logistics, because we have the water fronts available for us at all our 3 mega plants. So we would definitely encourage going forward extensive modularization, despite the fact that it adds cost upfront. That's our take. Mr. Samudra, I'll just take half a minute.
Please take very interesting. Yes.
Because of connectivity problem, I couldn't answer your earlier question. I was not trying to duck it. This was regarding your question to me on unrealistic schedules. I think Mr. Sankaran answered it very well by saying a schedule is neither realistic or unrealistic. It's an agreement between two parties meeting the expectations of each other. And I think if we have this collaborative approach of pre-award discussions to decide whether a schedule is, achievable or not achievable, I'm sure both the parties can come to an agreement, and we will definitely be demanding. We will not agree for a challenging schedule. We'll agree for a very demanding schedule. But I think it's a collaborative approach. Thank you.
Very true. So just a last statement from me for the
So we have
viewers.
one more question from Mr. K. Nandakumar.
Okay.
Is the Indian indirect taxation structure conducive for EPC business?
So that is more on the financial side. I think we should take up this in the tomorrow lecture. There's a separate commercial, lecture on the commercial aspect of the contract. But this is a subject which is a little complicated to answer in a matter of 2 minutes. But by and large, with the GST coming in, the EPC tender contracting has become much better. Earlier, we had a lot of problem in the GST was not there. We had a local sales tax, we had a works contract tax, and we had the excise duties issues. So now it has been simplified, but I'm not the right person to answer that. Maybe we can take it up tomorrow during the special program session on that.
So we have last question for the day.
Yeah.
Why do EPC companies do not collaborate to create large manufacturing capabilities in prefabricated structures? We do not have scale as being seen in China.
Yeah, I mean, you see, basically, I can just take it in general. If you look at the EPC companies, there are variety of EPC companies. There are companies like our company, for example, who only do engineering, or the Joshi's company where we don't have fabrication or construction capabilities. If you look at Larsen & Toubro, they also fabricate and do construction. But people like Thyssenkrupp or Aker or Technimont, they are just adding engineering. The add-on is only engineering. And they would like to be free with respect to choice of the fabrication or prefabrication or the yard. But I mean, it depends on each company, and we believe that we'll be able to with a good choice, we can be more economical. But some companies believe that if their own workshops are there or own fabrication yards are there for prefabrication, they could be more competitive. It's a question of how it will be looked at it. But I think we would like to have flexibility, and so majority of EPC companies, more than fabrication, they are going to be more construction oriented. If you look at Petrofac, they are more on the construction side. Or if you look at the international companies, they are largely construction contractor, not in the fabrication field. That's what I feel. Yeah.
So thank you.
So I think just a last statement I want to add that there are in the audience, there are very few EPC players normally, but there are so many suppliers of equipment and components and the engineering companies as well as construction companies. I think this kind of a debate or a discussion would also really enlighten you the woes of the EPC contractor and why they look forward towards the subcontractor or the vendors in the same manner how the client is treating us. And that's why we have to have back-to-back arrangement. So I think this is a good learning for all of us. And I think that will be very useful. And I must thank Chemtech for giving us the opportunity to have kind of a discussion like this. Thank you very much, all the speakers and the panelists, as well as the audience. Thank you, madam. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samudra. Thank you, Mr. Joshi. Thank you, Srinagesh, sir. Thank you, Mr. Sankaran.